Useless? I repeated, my hands trembling around the glass I held. The word echoed like a slap across my face. My daughter-in-law leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold, lips curling with contempt. Yes, she said loudly, making sure everyone at the table heard. You're useless, Linda. Too old to work, too weak to cook, too fragile to help with the children. You just sit here like a burden. The family dinner went silent. Knives and forks froze midair. My son cleared his throat, shifting in his seat, but he didn't defend me. He just muttered, "Let's not start this again." But she did start it, and she didn't stop. And frankly, she continued, her voice sharp, you should be grateful we even keep you here. Most people your age are in nursing homes. You're lucky we haven't sent you away yet. The words burned. My granddaughter's wide, innocent eyes flicked from her mother to me, not fully understanding, but hearing enough. My grandson, only 12, stared down at his plate, his small hands clenched into fists. I could see the confusion in his face, the way children absorb adult cruelty without knowing how to process it. Maybe we should discuss this later, my son's wife's sister chimed in awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the public humiliation unfolding before her children too. But my daughter-in-law wasn't finished. No, let's discuss it now. Everyone needs to know the truth about Linda. She pretends to help, but honestly, she's more work than she's worth. I felt my chest tighten, my breath becoming shallow. 68 years on this earth, and I was being dismissed like yesterday's newspaper. Imagine it. In your own son's house, being called useless. A burden. Dead weight. And no one speaking up for you. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. My granddaughter's lip trembled, and I could see her trying to understand why her mother was being so cruel to the woman who tucked her in with stories every night. But what they didn't know was that the useless grandmother they mocked would soon become their only hope. It wasn't just one night. The insults came daily, like poison dripping into water. But let me paint you the full picture of what my days looked like in that house. Each morning, I'd wake at 5:30 a.m., Old habits from decades of taking care of a family never die. I'd shuffle to the kitchen, hoping to start coffee, maybe prepare something small for breakfast. "Don't bother," became her morning greeting. "You'll just mess up my kitchen routine." So I'd sit at the small table by the window, watching the sunrise I used to share with my late husband John, feeling like a stranger in what was supposed to be my home. The worst part wasn't even the direct insults. It was the way she'd talk about me like I wasn't there. "Dr. Martinez says Mom's getting worse," she'd tell her friends on the phone, her voice carrying through the thin walls. She can barely remember where she put things. Yesterday she couldn't even figure out the new remote control. What she didn't mention was that I'd raised 3 children, including her husband. That I'd worked double shifts as a nurse for 37 years. That I'd memorized every birthday, anniversary, and important date for this family long before she even existed in our lives. First was, in the kitchen. "Don't touch that," my daughter-in-law snapped as I reached for a spoon. "I just wanted to help stir." "You'll spill it. You always make a mess. Sit down before you hurt yourself." Her friends visiting giggled into their wine glasses. My cheeks burned, but I swallowed my words. But there was more to that kitchen incident. I'd been making my famous chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe my granddaughter begged for every weekend. I'd measured everything perfectly, preheated the oven, and was just about to mix the ingredients when she walked in. "What is this disaster?" she'd shrieked, looking at the flour on the counter. "Look at this mess. You've got ingredients everywhere." "I was being careful," I said softly. "Emma loves these cookies," and I thought, Emma doesn't need cookies from someone who can't even measure properly. Look at this. She pointed to a tiny spill of vanilla extract. "You're destroying my kitchen." Her friend Sarah, whom I'd known since she was Emma's age, looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Linda's cookies are legendary in the neighborhood. My kids still ask for them." My daughter-in-law's face darkened. Well, my kitchen, my rules. Linda, clean this up and go watch TV or something. The humiliation stung worse because I knew Sarah would go home and tell her husband, "You should see how Jessica treats David's mother. It's just heartbreaking." At my granddaughter's birthday, she was opening her presents, giggling with excitement. I stretched my arms out, smiling, wanting to hold her. "Don't give her to Grandma," my daughter-in-law said loudly. "She's too shaky. What if she drops her?" The room filled with uneasy laughter. I pulled my hands back, my heart sinking. But that birthday party was even more painful than I initially described. I'd spent weeks working on a special gift for Emma. A hand-sewn quilt with patches representing every important moment in her 8 years of life. Her first Christmas, her first day of school, the family vacation to the lake. Each square was carefully crafted with love and memories. When Emma unwrapped it, her eyes lit up like stars. "Grandma, it's beautiful. Look, Mommy, there's the butterfly from when we went to the botanical gardens." For a moment, the room was filled with genuine appreciation. Even the other parents were impressed. "Linda, this is incredible," said Mrs. Patterson from next door. "You made this yourself?" Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law swooped in. "It's very rustic. Emma, let's put this away so it doesn't get dirty. You know how Grandma's eyesight isn't what it used to be." She folded the quilt roughly, dismissing hours of careful work. "Besides, Emma's got so many real presents to open, this will just clutter up her room." Emma's face fell. She reached for the quilt. "But Mommy, I want to—" "Later, sweetheart. Let's see what Aunt Monica got you." I watched as my hours of love were shoved into a corner, dismissed as if they meant nothing. Even during the family barbecue, neighbors gathered, laughter filling the air. I started to tell a funny story from my son's childhood. "Mom," my son interrupted sharply. "Nobody wants to hear your old stories. Let's keep it light, okay?" Everyone chuckled. I bit my lip, blinking away tears. The barbecue story goes deeper. Our neighbor, Mr. Chen, had actually asked me about David's childhood because his own grandson was going through similar struggles. "Linda, you raised such good kids. David was always so respectful, so helpful. How did you do it?" I started sharing about the time David, at age 7, decided to help by washing my car with peanut butter because he thought it would make it shiny. The way he cried when he realized his mistake, and how we turned it into a lesson about good intentions and thinking things through. Mr. Chen was laughing, genuinely engaged. "That's exactly what my Tommy would do. What did you tell him?" But before I could finish, David cut me off with that sharp dismissal. The conversation died, and Mr. Chen looked awkwardly at his plate. Later, I overheard my daughter-in-law talking to her sister. She goes on and on with these stories like anyone cares. It's embarrassing. She doesn't realize how boring she is. What stung was that David used to love those stories. He'd beg me to tell them when he was stressed from work, when he needed reminding of simpler times. Now they were just inconvenient. Or was it at church? We once stood for the hymn, and I took a moment longer to rise. My daughter-in-law leaned over, whispering loudly enough for others to hear. "She struggles so much. Honestly, she should just stay home next time." Several heads turned. My face flushed crimson as I clutched the pew for balance. Church had always been my sanctuary. For 40 years I'd sung in that choir, organized potlucks, visited sick parishioners. Pastor Williams still remembered when I organized the Christmas pageant for 23 consecutive years. That Sunday, I was moving slowly because my arthritis was flaring, something that happens to many people my age. But instead of a gentle hand to help, I got public humiliation. Mrs. Rodriguez, sitting behind us, reached forward and whispered, "Linda, are you all right, dear?" Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law turned around. "She's fine, just— you know how it is with age. Everything takes longer." The patronizing tone made my skin crawl. Mrs. Rodriguez looked shocked. She'd known me for decades, had seen me coordinate charity drives and comfort grieving families. After service, Pastor Williams approached. "Linda, I haven't seen you at choir practice lately. We miss your voice." "Oh, she can't really," my daughter-in-law started. "I'd love to come back," I interrupted, finding my voice. "I've just been adjusting to some changes." Pastor Williams smiled warmly. "The door's always open. Your wisdom and experience are invaluable to our community." I saw my daughter-in-law's jaw tighten. She didn't like being contradicted, especially not in public. Not just that, I won't forget the shopping trip when we went to the grocery store. I reached for a bag of flour. "Don't bother," she said, snatching it away. "You can't even carry this without breaking your back. Just trail behind like you always do." Two women nearby stared, whispering. One shook her head in pity. The shopping trip was monthly torture. She'd insist I come along for the fresh air. But really, it was another opportunity for public humiliation. I'd try to help, reaching for familiar items I'd been buying for decades. But every gesture was met with criticism. "That's not the brand we use anymore. You're reading the price wrong. Let me handle this before you embarrass us." At the checkout, I offered to pay for a few items with my Social Security money, my small way of contributing to the household. "Keep your money," she said loudly. "We don't need charity from you." The cashier, a young woman named Maria who'd seen me shop there for years, looked uncomfortable. She'd watched me raise my family, seen me come in with grandchildren over the years. "Mrs. Williams," Maria said quietly, "how are you doing?" "She's fine," my daughter-in-law answered before I could speak. "Just getting older, you know how it is." Maria's eyes met mine, and I saw the sympathy there. It was the same look I'd been seeing more and more, people recognizing that something wasn't right, but not knowing how to help. The drive home was silent, but the tension was suffocating. The final straw came. One evening, I was folding laundry. She stormed in. "You're always in the way. Admit it, Linda. You're old, you're useless, and this family doesn't need you anymore." I froze, a shirt slipping from my hands. My voice cracked. "One day you'll regret those words." But that final confrontation was the culmination of weeks of building frustration. I'd been trying to help more around the house, despite her constant criticism. That day, I'd spent hours carefully sorting and folding everyone's clothes, making sure each piece was perfect. It was something I could still do well, something that might prove my worth. When she found me in the laundry room, I thought maybe she'd appreciate the help. Instead, she exploded. "This is all wrong! You've mixed up David's work shirts with his casual ones. Emma's school clothes are wrinkled. And what did you do to my sweater?" I looked at the sweater. It was folded exactly as it should be. "I was careful with everything." "Careful?" She laughed bitterly. "You call this careful? You're making more work for everyone. We're better off doing things ourselves." That's when she said those final, cutting words that would echo in my mind for weeks. My grandson appeared in the doorway, having heard the shouting. "Mom, why are you yelling at Grandma?" "Go to your room, Tyler," she snapped. "This is between adults." But Tyler didn't move. At 12, he was old enough to recognize injustice. Grandma was just trying to help. "Your grandmother," she said coldly, "needs to understand her limitations." The boy looked at me with such sadness. In that moment, I realized the children were learning that this was acceptable behavior, that elderly family members could be treated as burdens. That night, I sat alone in my small room, staring at my late husband's photo. "John," I whispered, tears streaking my face. "They think I'm nothing. They've forgotten how I sold my wedding ring to pay for tuition, how I worked myself sick to put food on their table, how I gave everything for this family." I pressed the frame to my chest. They don't see me anymore. Just a shadow. Just useless. but talking to John's photo brought back memories they'd all forgotten. I remembered working double shifts at the hospital while pregnant with David, because we needed the insurance. I remembered staying up all night when he had pneumonia at age 4, holding him while he struggled to breathe. I remembered taking out a second mortgage on our home to pay for his college, selling my mother's jewelry to cover the costs. When David graduated with honors, he hugged me tight and whispered, "I could never have done this without you, Mom. I'm going to make you proud." And he had. He'd become a successful accountant, married his college sweetheart, bought this beautiful house. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten the sacrifices that made his success possible. I remembered my daughter-in-law's early years in the family, too. When she was struggling with postpartum depression after Emma's birth, who stayed up with the crying baby? Who cooked meals and cleaned the house while she recovered? Who listened without judgment when she cried about feeling overwhelmed? Me. When Tyler was born premature and spent weeks in the NICU, who sat with her in that sterile waiting room? Who held her when she sobbed with fear that she might lose her son? Me. But those memories seemed to have evaporated like morning mist. Then I lifted my chin, wiping my tears. But I know something they've forgotten. Strength doesn't disappear with age. Wisdom doesn't retire. I just need one chance, and when it comes, I'll remind them exactly who I am. I stood up and walked to my dresser, pulling out a small box I kept hidden in the back drawer. Inside was my nursing license, still valid, and a certificate of appreciation from the hospital where I'd worked for nearly 4 decades. Linda Williams, I read aloud, in recognition of 37 years of dedicated service, exceptional patient care, and leadership in emergency medical situations. They'd forgotten that their useless burden had once been trusted with life and death decisions, that I'd performed CPR more times than I could count, that I'd trained younger nurses and been called upon in crisis after crisis. I had skills they'd never needed to see, knowledge they'd taken for granted, experience they'd dismissed as irrelevant. But deep in my heart, I knew that someday, somehow, those skills would matter again. That chance came sooner than I thought. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. The family gathered for a big cookout. The smell of grilled meat filled the air, children ran about, laughter rang across the yard. The barbecue was supposed to be a celebration. Tyler had made honor roll, and Emma had won second place in the school science fair. For once, the atmosphere felt lighter, more like the family gatherings we used to have when John was alive. I found myself actually relaxing, sitting in the shade and watching the children play. Several neighbors had come over, including the Chen family and Mrs. Rodriguez from church. For a brief moment, it felt like I belonged again. Emma ran up to me, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, come see my rock collection. I found 3 new ones this week." She grabbed my hand, and for once, her mother didn't intervene. We walked over to her little display on the patio table, carefully arranged stones of different colors and sizes. "This one's quartz," she said proudly, "and this one might be fool's gold, but Tyler says it's just pyrite." "Pyrite is the scientific name for fool's gold, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "You're both right." Her eyes lit up. "Really? How do you know that?" Before I could answer, she was pulling me toward the buffet table. "Grandma, you have to try Mom's new potato salad recipe." My granddaughter skipped happily, chasing balloons. Her giggles made my heart swell. For about an hour, I almost forgot the months of tension and cruelty. I was just grandma again, part of the family, included in conversations and laughter. Tyler showed me his latest baseball cards. Mr. Chen asked for my opinion on his tomato plants. Mrs. Rodriguez complimented the apple pie I'd managed to bake early that morning before anyone could stop me. Maybe, I thought, things could get better. Maybe this was a turning point. Then suddenly, she collapsed. Her little hands clawed at her throat. Her eyes widened in panic. Her lips turned blue. "Somebody help," she choked out, gasping. Chaos exploded. Plates fell, drinks spilled, guests screamed. The transformation from peaceful family gathering to emergency was instantaneous. Emma had been laughing one moment, running with a piece of grilled chicken in her hand, and the next, she was on the ground, fighting for air. My son froze, face pale. "Call 911 now!" My daughter-in-law shrieked, "What's happening? Somebody do something!" Neighbors panicked. No one moved. In that crucial moment, 40 years of medical training kicked in. My mind went crystal clear. The same clarity I'd felt in countless hospital emergencies. I assessed the situation in seconds. Child in respiratory distress, hands at throat, obvious choking signs. The piece of chicken had lodged in her airway, but I did. "Move!" I roared, pushing through the crowd. My voice cut like steel. The authority in my voice was something they hadn't heard in months. This wasn't the dismissed, useless woman they'd been treating like a burden. This was Nurse Linda Williams, who'd spent decades saving lives. I dropped behind my granddaughter, wrapped my arms around her tiny frame, and performed the Heimlich maneuver. 1 push, 2, 3. My hands were steady. My technique was perfect. Every movement was precise and purposeful, muscle memory from years of training and practice. "Please, God," I whispered. "Please." On the 4th, she gasped, coughed. The piece of food shot free. Air rushed back into her lungs. She burst into sobs, clinging to me. "She's breathing," I said softly, holding her against my chest. "She's safe." The yard fell into stunned silence. All eyes on me. The woman they had called useless had just saved the day. My daughter-in-law staggered forward, her face ghost pale. You saved her?" she whispered. I turned slowly, still cradling my granddaughter. My voice cut sharp and cold. "Yes. The woman you mocked, the woman you humiliated, the grandmother you said was too weak to hold her, is the reason size." Gasps erupted. A neighbor muttered, "My God!" Mr. Chen stepped forward, his voice filled with awe. "Linda, that was incredible. Where did you learn to do that?" 37 years as a registered nurse," I said clearly, making sure everyone heard. "I've performed the Heimlich maneuver more times than I can count. I've saved dozens of lives." The crowd murmured in amazement. These neighbors had known me for years, but they'd never heard the details of my professional life. They'd seen the dismissive treatment from my family and assumed I was just a frail elderly woman. Mrs. Rodriguez put her hand to her heart. "I had no idea you were a nurse, Linda. No wonder you knew exactly what to do." I looked straight at my son. "And you froze. You, the man I sacrificed everything for, stood there helpless. Tell me again, who's useless now?" His face crumpled. He lowered his head in shame. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken truths. Everyone could see the irony. The family member they'd watched being dismissed and belittled had been the only one capable of handling the emergency. I turned back to my daughter-in-law. "All these months, you laughed at me. You shoved me aside. You made me feel like dirt. But when your daughter needed saving, your hands shook while mine stayed steady. Think about that the next time you open your mouth." Whispers spread through the crowd. A neighbor began clapping, then another. Soon the whole yard applauded, not for them, but for me. Mrs. Patterson, who'd witnessed some of the kitchen humiliation months earlier, spoke up loudly. "Linda, you're a hero. Emma is so lucky to have a grandmother with your skills and experience." The applause continued, but it wasn't just polite appreciation. It was recognition, respect, and validation. Everything I'd been denied in my own home. I smirked, raising my chin high. Remember this lesson, all of you. Never underestimate a woman who's lived, loved, and sacrificed. We carry strength you'll never understand. Emma was still in my arms, calmer now but unwilling to let go of me. "Grandma," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you saved my life." "That's what grandmothers do, sweetheart," I replied. "We protect our families, even when they don't realize they need protection." The meaning wasn't lost on anyone. That night, the story spread through the neighborhood. At church, people whispered, "Did you hear? Linda saved her granddaughter's life. Her own family had called her useless." The phone calls started that very evening. Mrs. Rodriguez called to check on Emma and to praise my quick thinking. Mr. Chen called to ask more about my nursing background. Even Sarah, my daughter-in-law's friend who'd witnessed the kitchen incident, called to express her admiration. "Linda," she said, "I've been thinking about that day in the kitchen. I should have said something. The way you were treated, it wasn't right. And now, seeing what you did today, you're amazing." My daughter-in-law could barely hold her head up. My son avoided my eyes. The next few days were tense but different. The children stayed close to me, especially Emma, who seemed to understand that something fundamental had shifted. Tyler, my 12-year-old grandson, surprised me most of all. "Grandma," he said one evening as I tucked him in, "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you before. I didn't know you were a nurse. I didn't know how awesome you were." "You couldn't have known," I said gently, "but now you do. And that's what matters. Will you tell me about being a nurse? About the people you helped?" For the first time in months, someone in this family wanted to hear my stories. But my granddaughter clung to me tighter than ever, whispering, "Grandma's my hero." The change in Emma was remarkable. She'd always loved me, but now there was a deeper understanding. She'd seen her mother's cruelty exposed, witnessed my competence under pressure, and realized that the adults in her life weren't always right about everything. She started asking questions about my past, my career, my experiences. She wanted to know about the hospital, about the patients I'd helped, about what it was like being a nurse. "Did you really save lots of people, Grandma?" "I helped many people over the years, sweetheart. It was my job, but it was also my calling." "What's a calling?" "It's when you feel in your heart that you're meant to do something important, taking care of people, helping them when they're scared or hurt. That was my calling." She nodded solemnly, absorbing every word. At dinner days later, silence hung thick. Finally, my son spoke. "Mom, we were wrong. We owe you everything." But his apology felt hollow, forced by circumstances rather than genuine understanding. I could see in his eyes that he was still processing what had happened, still struggling to reconcile the burden he'd been told I was with the competent woman who'd saved his daughter's life. I sipped my tea, smirking. "Oh, you'll face me every day, and every time you see me, you'll remember. The useless woman you dismissed is the one who saved your child." I leaned back, voice calm but fierce. "Useless? No. I am Linda Grace Williams, and I am the backbone of this family." The silence that followed was sweeter than applause, but the real changes were yet to come. Word of the incident had spread beyond our neighborhood. Pastor Williams visited to check on Emma and ended up staying for 2 hours, listening to my stories about the hospital and asking if I'd consider returning to volunteer at the church's health clinic. "We've been struggling to find someone with real medical experience," he said. "Would you be interested?" For the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about something. "I'd love to help." My daughter-in-law, who'd been listening from the kitchen, said nothing, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. The woman she'd spent months diminishing was being actively recruited by community leaders. The local newspaper even picked up the story. A reporter called asking for an interview about the heroic grandmother who'd saved her granddaughter's life. They wanted to feature me in their Community Heroes section. My daughter-in-law tried to control the narrative, suggesting we should keep it private for Emma's sake. But Emma herself wanted to tell everyone about her superhero grandma. The interview ran with a beautiful photo of Emma and me together, her arm wrapped around my shoulders, both of us smiling. The headline read, "Retired Nurse's Quick Thinking Saves Granddaughter's Life." That newspaper clipping now sits framed on my dresser, next to John's photo. 3 weeks after the incident, something beautiful happened. Tyler came home from school with a project assignment. Interview a family member about their career and present it to the class. "Grandma," he said, "will you help me with my presentation? I want to talk about nursing and about what you did to save Emma." For 2 hours, we sat together at the kitchen table while he took notes. He asked thoughtful questions about my training, my experiences, the challenges and rewards of nursing. He wanted to know about the most difficult cases, the most rewarding saves, the changes I'd seen in medicine over the years. "This is so cool, Grandma. You're like a real-life superhero." When he presented his project, he called me at school from the principal's office. "Grandma, I got an A+, and Mrs. Peterson wants to know if you'd come talk to our health class about CPR and first aid." My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway, listening to the conversation. When I hung up, she didn't say anything, but I caught something in her expression. Not quite remorse, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. They thought they buried me in shame, but they forgot. I was the seed, and seeds always rise. The months that followed brought a transformation I never could have imagined. The community health clinic welcomed me with open arms. Pastor Williams introduced me as our answered prayer, a qualified medical professional willing to volunteer. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I put on my white coat again. The feeling was indescribable. Being valued for my skills, trusted with important responsibilities, treated with the respect I'd earned through decades of service. My family watched this renaissance with mixed feelings. They could no longer deny my competence, my value, my contributions. The evidence was everywhere: newspaper clippings, thank you cards from clinic patients, invitations to speak at community events. Emma started telling her friends that her grandmother was famous for saving her life. Tyler's friends thought it was awesome that his grandma was a nurse. Even their attitudes toward aging and older adults seemed to shift. But perhaps the most profound change was in how I saw myself. For months, I'd begun to internalize their narrative, that I was indeed becoming useless, a burden, someone whose best years were behind her. The choking incident didn't just save Emma's life, it saved my sense of self-worth. I realized that experience, wisdom, and skills don't have expiration dates. That dismissing older adults as useless doesn't just hurt them. It wastes valuable resources and knowledge that communities desperately need. My daughter-in-law's treatment of me had been more than cruel. It had been wasteful. She'd been trying to sideline someone who had decades of life-saving experience, someone who could contribute meaningfully to family and community. 6 months later, as I write this story, things are still complicated. My daughter-in-law hasn't fully apologized or acknowledged the full extent of her behavior. My son is still processing his role in allowing the mistreatment to continue. But Emma and Tyler see me differently now. They understand that their grandmother isn't just someone to tolerate or help. I'm someone with valuable knowledge, important stories, and real capabilities. And most importantly, I see myself clearly again. I am Linda Grace Williams. I am a skilled professional, a loving grandmother, a valuable community member, and a woman whose best contributions may still be ahead of her. The seed didn't just rise, it bloomed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another story. And tomorrow, join me for a story on how I dealt with my daughter-in-law after my son's death when she took everything from me.